Ashamaa harka fuunee daawwattoota keenya kun keessatti kan jirtan tamsaasa kallattiin isinii darbaatti kan jiru Oromoo Diyaaspooraa Miidiyaa. Oromoo Diyaaspooraa Miidiyaa guyyaa irratti keessummaan qaba. Keessummaan koo Jaan Keeler jedhama. Jaan Keeler yeroo murtaa'eedhaaf biyya Oromiyaa keessa jiraateeti kan jiru. Haa ta'u Jaan Keeler nama adii yookiis immoo faranjii haa ta'u biyya Ameerikaatti dhalatee haa guddatu malee turtii waggaa muraasaa Oromiyaa keessa ture keessatti afaan Oromoo dubbachuu danda'a. Isa waliin kan nuyi marii taasisnu. Maareen warreen nu hordofaa jirtan addunyaa garaagaraa irra jirtan kunniin gama chaanaalii 16ffaa fi gadaa bilisummaa chaanaalii haaluma wal fakkaatuun immoo gama marsaalee hawaasummaa nu hordofaatti jirtan bara haaraa kanaan baga geessanii bara 2022 jecha barri kun kan gammachuu kan milkii badhaadhinaa fi bara itti injifannoo argattan isiniif haa ta'u dhaamsa koo waliin turaan isiniin jedha qophichi qindeessuun kan si waliin simbiraan ga'u itichaa guddataati keessumaan koo immoo jaanii Jaan waliin wayita turtii taasisnu afaan Oromoodhaan dubbanna. Tarii namoonni Oromiyaa keessa bara jireenya isaanii jiraatan afaan Oromoo wayita isaanii dubbanne taajjabna. Jaan garuu yeroo barsiisaa ture yeroo gabaabduu keessatti afaan Oromoo dubbachuu danda'eera. Warreen Oromiyaa keessatti dhalatanii guddatanii hanga manguddummaatti jiraatan maaliif afaan Oromoo baruu hin dandeenyedha. Isa kanarratti tarii Jaan waan jedhu qaba. Turtiin keessan waliin haa ta'u. Gidduudhaanis egaa afaan Ingiliffaa fayyadamuun keenya waan hin hafneef nu faana turtii taasisan isiniin jedha. Hello, our viewers. This is our special program on Oromo Diaspora Media. Today I have a special guest. Our guest is Jaan Keeler. With Jaan Keeler, we are going to discuss about Oromo, Oromiyaa, and Afaan Oromoo at the same time. So Jaan has been in Oromiyaa for a few years. During his stay, he has been learning Afaan Oromoo and he speaks Afaan Oromoo now. So there are many individuals who have been in Oromiyaa for their entire life, but they can't speak this language. So how Jaan come across learning Afaan Oromoo and what kind of message Jaan have for others individuals? So we make our interview in Afaan Oromoo. At the meantime, we speak in English. So stay with us. I'm Iticha Gudata, who is hosting this program. My guest is Jaan. So Jaan, baga nagaan dhufte.
Amen.
Tole, bara haaraati mee warreen nu daawwachaatti jiran maqaa kee itti miitii ayyaana kana immoo bara haaraa immoo baga geessan mee jedhime.
Amen. Maqaa koo Jaan jedhama. Baga ayyaana miti.
Oromiyaa keessa hagam jiraatte afaan Oromoo akkamitti baruu dandeessa?
Achi jiraate neno metu keessa jiraate ani barsiisa ture. Baadiyyaa keessa jiraate yoo namoota wajjin jiraata afaan barachuu qaba. Ani sirriitti dubbachuu hin danda'u miti garuu naan baay'ee yaale. Namoota wajjin jiraata yeroo barsiisa ture Ingiliffaa barsiise garuu informationi wal baranne miti. So kanaafuu dirqama koo afaan Oromoo dubbachuu barachuu qabe. So yaada kana wajjin nama kabaja akkasumas aadaa Oromoo Noora sana kootu haa nyaannu jedhee kana baay'ee kabaje. Nema kabaje. So kanaafuu Oromiifaa dubbachuu yaale. Dubbachuu barade. So yaada koo isa kana.
Baay'ee gaarii. Tole egaa ammatti afaan Oromoo waggaa meeqa illoo abbaa boor jiraatteeti afaan Oromoo kan itti batte?
Waggaa lama achi jiraadde garuu GSD nchini keessa jiraate. Nchini holeta bira. Achi kuta Oromiifaa qabe guyyaatti tokko kuta Oromiifaa kuta Oromiifaa qabe GSD booda tino dubbachuu danda'e garuu yeroo namoota wajjin jiraate ani baay'ee fooyyesse.
Baay'ee gaarii. Ammayyuu qajeelchitee dubbattaa waggaa lama keessatti afaan baruu yoo danda'ame fakkeenyaaf namoonni biyya kana dhufan waggaa lama gidduutti yoo kutannoo qabaatan afaan baruu danda'u jechuudha afaan Ingiliffaa. Akkuma sana immoo namoonni Oromiyaa keessa jiraatan immoo afaan sanayyuu hin dubbanne jiru. Umurii isaanii guutuu achi keessa jiraatan garuu hin dubbatan. Isaan kanaaf dhaamsa maalii qabdaati?
Gaafiin kee wat xaxaadha. Yeroo nama asuma dhufe nama Oromoo wajjin jiraadha miti. Kanaafuu Oromiifa baay'ee dubbadhe. Ingiliffaa fayyadama garuu yeroo baay'ee Oromiifa dubbachuu hin dandeessa yoo as dhufta. Akkasumas ijoollee Oromoo mana barumsa keessa Ingiliffaa dubbachuu danda'a. Kanaafuu mana keessa Oromiifa dubbachuu danda'a garuu fayyadamuu xinnoo jira. Yeroo ani metu deeme filannoo hin qabu. Sabiinsa namoota Oromoo wajjin jiraadhe. Nama bira hin jiru. Akkasumas rakkoo Itoophiyaa keessa ani barsiisa ture garuu barsiisa baay'ee Ingiliffaa dubbachuu hin danda'u. Kana rakkisaadha miti. So barsiisa Ingiliffaa jira garuu barsiisa lama sadii Ingiliffaa danda'a. Garuu barsiisa 25 jira. So kanaafuu gaafiin kee wal xaxaadha sabiinsa contextii jira. Contextii. Like there's lots of reasons.
Baay'ee gaarii. Tole gaaffiin koo kan hin jechuu barbaade. Fakkeenyaaf ati iddoo sana jiraattee waggaa 2 gidduutti afaan Oromoo barachuu dandeesseetta. Ati baay'ee nama jabaadha, nama cimaadha jechuudha. Namoonni tokko immoo kan Oromoo hin taane iddooma sana keessa naannoo mattuu jiraatanii yookiis Iluu Abbaa Booraa jiraatanii afaan Oromoo barachuudhaaf fedhii hin qabanii afaan Amaariffaa fa'aa dubbatu yookiis afaan adda biraa dubbatu. Warreen kanaaf dhaamsa maalii qabda isa jedhudha gaaffiin kun.
So sabiinsa yoo nama sirriitti kabajta afaan nama sana barachuu qabda. Hal tokko nama Oromiyaa keessa deeme garuu hawaasa sirriitti hin beekne. Ani yaada sana Amaariffaa fayyadamuu qaba sabiinsa biyyatti hunda namoota Amaariffaa dubbachuu danda'a. Yaada koo ani Amaariffaa diimaa hin qabu. Dabub diimaa hin qabu Oromiyaa fedhii qabe. Kanaafuu afaan Oromiifa barachuu qabe. Ani Amaariffaa dubbachuu hin danda'u hin beeku. Salaamnoo piisnoo du'a beeka. Garuu fedhii koo Oromoodha. Fedhii koo magaala koodha. Magaala koo laaloo ture. Fedhii koo laaloodha. Kanaafuu afaan maaloo laaloo keessa jira? Oromiifadha. Oromiifa du'a jira. Baadiyyaadha. Namoota kuma 4 jira. Baay'ee xiqqoodha. So for akkasumas university keessa namoota India jira. Fedhii waa'ee hawaasa hin jiru. Fedhii waa'ee bareeda miti. Fedhii koo jireenya ture. Ani barachuu barbaade. Barsiisuu barbaade akkasumas barachuu barbaade. Kanaafuu nama gaafadhe maaloo wal jijjiiruu dandeenya. Afaan knowledge baay'eedha garuu afaan ijoollee maaloo jira baadiyyaa Oromiyaa keessadha. Oromiifadha. Kanaafuu yoo ani sirriitti barsiisuu qabe Oromiifa dubbachuu yaale. Akkasumas kutaa koo keessa ture ijoollee baay'ee sodaadha. Ani gaafiin qaba deebiin qabda gaafiin dubbadhe. Ijoollee baay'ee harkaan hin hin ol kaasu did not raise their hands. That's not correct, but ani sagalee kee ol kaasi jedhe harkaan ol kaasi jedhe garuu nama hunda sodaadhe. So kanaafuu yoo ijoollee jajjabeessuu qabe afaan isaanii yaaluu qabe. Yaada koo si galee?
Yaa naa galee tole. Ijoolleen gaaffilee garaagaraa si gaafachuu barbaadu.
Eh,
Ol kaasedhanii yaada isaanii dhiyeessu. Isa kana immoo waliin dubbachuudhaaf ijoolleen
Eeyya.
dhaga'u sirra jiraata. Kanaaf immoo afaan kana baruu murteessitee jechuudha. Tole
Eeyya.
waan Oromoo waa'ee aadaa Oromoos ta'e waan Oromoo maal fa'aa jaallatte jechuun amma kaasaa turte fakkeenyaaf koottu seenii nyaadhu nama jedhu waan akkasii kaasteetta. Waan Oromoo maal fa'aa jaallatte kan biyya kana hin jirre biyya faranjii kana keessa biyyatti dhalatte keessa kan hin jirre kan Oromiyaa keessatti argitee baay'ee jaallatte maal fa'aa jira maal nutti himu?
Tole. Gaaffiin kee cimaadha sabiinsa. Like murtii baay'ee qaba. Dugama murtii koo aadaa baay'ee jalaadha. Murtii koo keessadha. Sabiinsa, you know, waa'ee michuu harkaan wajjin hin beekne. Garuu nama hunda na gargaare. Waan tokko waati bilcheessne waati bilcheessu hin beekne. Garuu natti barsiise. Nama murtii koo keessadha. So kana baay'ee jalaadha. Akkasumas gaafa ayyaana ani karoora hojjechuu qabe. Sabiinsa nama hunda na affeere. Ajani kotu dorowati hanyanu. Kanafu ani karoora hojjechuu qaba. Mana fentu demu qaba, mana habiba demu qaba, garuu gara tokko qaba. Nama hunda jani nyaatu jedhe. Akkasumas nama hunda kabaju barbaada. Yoo hin nyaatu rakkisaadha. Si kabaja garuu gara tokko qaba. Kanafu ani karoora hojjete. Nema tokko deme, oh ifama baru nandufa, or the day before, like ingata, the day before also, I would go. Akkasumas buna, buna baay'ee jalaadha. Ilubabor biyya bunaadha. Akkasumas isanii tokko bari lama ture. Buna baay'ee natti tola. Guyyaatti tokko sanii shan ja'a dhuge. Aadaa kana baay'ee namatti tola. Akkasumas aadaa kutaa keessa baay'ee jalaadha. Sabiinsa kabaja jira. Miti ijoollee barsiisa kabaja. Ameerika keessa yaada sana barduudha garuu haa tokko tokko aadaa kana hin jiru. Garuu it's complicated. Haa tokko tokko aadaa kutaa keessa Ameerika barduudha, haa tokko tokko Ethiopia keessa barduudha. Let me think. Is there anything else? There is. Baay'ee jira garuu akkasumas waan tokko sitti hima. Haadha mana koo Oromoodha. So gaafa walga'ii ture jaarsuma wajjinidha. Jaarsuma argate ganatti birhaanuu qabe abbaan isheen wajjin walga'ii qabe Oromiifa dubbadde. Aadaa kana in hindsight. Gaafa sana baay'ee sodaadhe. Garuu amma yaada kana baay'ee bareeduudha. Sabiinsa abbaan isheen na gaafate isheen eessa deemuu barbaada? Kan biraanee ishee fufuu barbaada jedhe. Maal gochuu barbaada? Baay'ee na gaafate. Aadaa kana baay'ee bareeduudha. Garuu baay'ee nan sodaadhe.
Baay'ee gaariidha. Tole gaajaan kanarra dabartee immoo Oromoo baruu bira dabartee Oromoodha kanatti fuuti. Haadhi warraa kee yookiis haati manaa kee Oromoodha. Waan Oromoo kana baay'ee jaallatteetta. Gara fuulduraatti gara Oromiyaatti deebitee barsiisuu ni barbaaddaa laata?
Akkasumas achi lafa qaba mana ijaara. Goga ko adida guru lubu ko Oromoodha. Sabiinsa achi nama hunda ada America akka ada Oromo miti. Yeroo America keessa jiraate never felt a part of something. Ada America homa hin jiru. Guru Ada Oromoo nama hunda Johnny kotu afaan Kenya barachuu barbaada buna dugi jedhe. So kanaafuu onay ko Oromoodha. Lubu ko Oromoodha. So kanaafuu achi barsiisuu fufu barbaada. Ama barataadha universityidha. Kana booda achi dabii barbaada. Professorii ta'uu barbaada university matudha. Abdii ko guru akkasumas galma haadha manaa koo akka koo miti guru lafa achi Kenya mana ijaara Oromiyaa baay'ee barbaachisaadha.
Baay'ee gaarii tole ammati kan jette ani fuulli koo adiidha malee ani Oromoodhaa jette. Akkas ta'e
Sirriidha.
Akkamitti Oromoo ta'uu fudhatte jechuun waan baay'ee jaallattedha qabdaa jechuudha. Waan ani kana booda Oromoodha si jechisiisee Oromiyaatti immoo deebi'een mana ijaarradhee achitti immoo barattoota yuunivarsiitii barsiisee piroofeesara ta'uu qaba jettee waan jaallatte addaa qabdaa jechuudha. Tole amma gaa isa kanarra dabarreetoo tarii waan tokko lama kaasna hanga danda'ame qalbiitti suutadhee si dubbachuu yaala. Ati afaan Oromoo qajeelchitee beekta. Waan dura sii gaafadhe otoo nan deebisiin kan haftetu jira sirriitti. Yeroo darbe garuu yeroo ayyaana irreechaa irrattan si arge biyya kanatti. Ayyaana irreechaa uffata Oromoo uffattee akkuma amma bareeddee jirtu kanatti argamteetta. Guyyaa sana waan jette tokko qabda. Fakkeenyaaf biyya tokko keessa yoo jiraanne afaan iddoo sanaa baruu qabna kan jedhu kaasteetta. Oromiyaa keessa yoo ilaalte Oromoon guddaadha, saba bal'aadha. Afaan isaallee afaan Amaariffaatiin ol nama baay'eetu dubbata. Garuu afaan hojii biyya sanaa miti. It is not an official language, especially at federal level. So isa kana faana wal qabsiistee ati afaan maajoriitiin dubbatu garuu afaan hojii biyya sanaa yogguu inni hin taane taajjamna yookiis argina. Namoonni immoo Oromiyaa keessa jiraatanii qomoo adda biraa ta'anii osoo naannoo isaaniitiin namni hundumtuu afaan Oromoo dubbachaatti jiru afaan Oromoon dubbatan tarii jibbinsaaf ta'uu danda'a yookiis immoo waan tokko tokko ta'uu danda'a. Isa kanatti ati adii taatee faranjii taatee afaan kana barteetta. Warreen biyya sana keessa jiraatanii waluma fakkaachaa garuu afaan sana hin barreedhaaf maal dhaamta barsiisaa Jaan?
So gaafiin kee cimaadha. Akkasuma anis gaafiin qaba. Ilaalcha waa'ee Oromiyaa keessa tokko miti. Sabiinsa iddoo tokko Oromiyaa dubbachuu qabna jedhe miti. Garuu iddoo tokko Dima hin qabu jedhe Amaariffaa haa ta'u Oromiyaa haa ta'u. So kanaafuu yaada koo Oromiyaa dubbachuu qaba sabiinsa nama hunda baadiyyaa keessa Oromiyaa du'aa jira. Garuu magaalaa keessa ilaalcha biraa jira miti. Kanaafuu deebiin koo Oromiyaa barbaachisaadha. Akkasumas like seenaa jira miti. Waa'ee mutama keessadha. Amaariffaa jira sabiinsa seenaa jira. Seenaa kana seenaa kana sirriidha hin beeku seenaa kana sirrii miti. Garuu amma seenaa kana jijjiiruu hin dandeessu. Mutama Oromiyaa keessa Oromiyaa fufuu qabda. Akkas garuu deebiin hin qabu waa'ee biyyaadha. Miti.
Baay'ee gaarii. Tole Jaan tarii dhumarratti dhaamsa addaa yoo qabaatte hiree siifan kennaa itti aansinee garuu afaan Ingiliffaan waan gabaabduu goona. Isa dura garuu beeksisa tokkoon qabaa. Tarii waan dhaamtu yookiis waan jettu yoo qabaatte waa'ee Oromoo irratti warruma afaan Oromoo dhaga'uuf waan dhaamtu yoo qabaatte ergaa addaa.
Can you repeat that one more time? Irna Dabi.
Waan hin jechuu barbaade fakkeenyaaf dhumarratti warreen nu caqasaatti jiranii gama Oromoo diyaaspooraa miidiyaadhaanis ta'e gama chaanaalii adda addaadhaan nu caqasuutti jiran warra nu dhaggeeffachaa jiruudhaaf dhaamsa yookiis ergaa addaa yoo qabda ta'e akkas godhaa jettee waan himtu yookiis kan gorsitu yoo qabaatte.
Tole. What is one thing I want? Tole. Gaafiin qaba. Ani Oromiyaa turtii dubbachuu hin danda'u, miti?
Gaariidha, baay'ee gaarii dubbatta.
Biroo turtii dubbachuu hin danda'u. Ijoollee asuma kutaa Oromiyaa diaspora tino jira. Waan tokko jalqabuu hin dandeessa. Kutaa Oromiyaa gochuu dandeessa. Sabinsa rakkoo kee diaspora baay'ee Oromiyaa irraanfadhe, miti? Kanaafuu waan tokko gochuu hin dandeessa. Kana yaade. Sabinsa ani jalqabuu barbaada, fufuu barbaada. Garuu kutaa hin jiru. Waan tokko gochuu dandeessa. Kutaa Oromiyaa jalqabuu hin dandeessa.
Baay'ee gaarii. Tole, biyya kanatti afaan Oromoon barsiifamuu qabaa. Namni biraallee afaan Oromoo barachuu qabaa jechaa jirta miti? Galatoon. Tole, daawwattoota keenyaa egaa namni waliin turtii taasisaatti jiru Jaan immoo turtii waggaa 2 mattuu Illuu Abbaaboor keessa barsiisaa ture keessatti afaan Oromoo hagamma dhageessan dubbachaatti jira. Egaan Jaan kan jechaatti jiru haati warraa koo yookiis haati manaa koo Oromoodha. Ani bifaan adii ta'us Oromoodha jedheeti kan dubbatu. Gara fuulduraatti illee gaafan sadarkaa maastersii koo yookiis digirii lammaffaa koo as yuunivarsiitii irraa xumuru Oromiyaa keessatti deemuudhaan yoon carraa argadhee yuunivarsiitii mattuu keessatti barsiisuu barbaada. Achitti illee mana ijaarrachuu barbaadaadha kan jedhu. Waan Oromoo waan baay'ee akka jaallate dubbata. Amma gabaabinaan afaan Ingiliffaan xiqqoo ishee turtii taasisna. Egaan namoonni Oromiyaa keessa ta'anii afaan Oromoon baranneetu jiru. Isa kanarrattis waan dhaame qaba Jaan. Beeksisa laman wal duraa duubaa qabaa. Isa daawwannee walitti deebina. Keessumaa yeroo ammaa kan dhibeen vaayirasii koronaa akkaan jabaateeti kan jiru. Yeroo kana keessatti immoo namoonni fageenya keenya eeggachuun, talaallii fudhachuun kanneen keessaa isa booda afaan Ingiliffaan waan gabaabduu goonaa. So Jaan na eegi beeksisa 2 daqiiqaa tokko gadiin qabaa. Sana erga daawwannee walitti deebina. Dhaamsi kun biiroo fayyaa Minisootaa MDH fi Ramzii kaawuntii irraa kan darbedha. Nu caqasaa.
Talaalliiwwan humneessituu erga nu barbaachisu ta'anii namoonni maaliif talaallii COVID-19 fudhachuu qabu? Talaalliin ittisa hunda caalu kan nuti COVID-19 ittiin ofirraa ittisnudha. Talaalliiwwan jiran akkasuma dhibee hamaa fi du'a irraa ittisuuf ittisa cimaa kennu. Talaalliiwwan kun tatamsa'ina vaayirasichaa hir'isuun hawaasa keessan gargaaruu ni danda'a. Kun namoota hanga ammaatti talaalamuu hin dandeenye yookiin namoota talaallicha irraa ittisa gahaa argachuu hin dandeenyeef ittisa ta'a. Talaalliiwwan kunniin akaakuuwwan vaayirasichaa nuti har'a argaa jirru irratti ittisuuf bu'a qabeeyyiidha. Garuu dhibee haaraa hundi vaayirasichaaf carraa dabalataa bifa jijjiirrachuu fi talaalliiwwan kana jalaa miliquuf carraa kennaaf. Talaalliiwwan humneessituun COVID-19 akkuma talaalliiwwan humneessituu talaalliiwwan biroo vaayirasicha irraa ittisuuf ittisa sadarkaa guddaa argachuuf isin gargaaru. Ittisa jalqabaa sana argachuun garuu ammayyuu baay'ee barbaachisaadha. Hanga ammaatti hin talaalamne taanaan yeroon isaa amma. Dhiyeessaa naannoo keessanii argachuuf vaccines.org daawwadhaa.
Hayyee harka fuune maqaan kiyya Aishaa Aliiti. Ani ogummaan kiyya nersiidha yookaan waa'ee fayyaa keessaan hojjedha. Ramzii kaawuntii keessatti waldaa hawaasa Oromootirraa nin hirmaadha. Guyyaa tokko daa'ima argachuuf karoora ni qabda yoo ta'e talaallii COVID-19 fudhachuun hagam fayyaa kiyya miidha jettee yaaduun malta. Oduun gaariin jirtu ragaan talaalliin COVID-19 rakkoo ulfarratti fidu yookiin ulfa miidhu mul'isu tokkolleen hin jiru. Dhugumatti rakkoon dhala dhabuu miidhaa rakkoo talaallii kamirraahuu fudhachuun wal qabatuu miti. Hojiin talaallii qaamni kee vaayirasii COVID-19 akkamitti akka ifirraa ittisu barsiisuudha. Yeroo qaamni kee akkaataa miidhaan irra gahuu maluu danda'u firraa ittiin ittisu baratee ofiinuu talaallichi ni dhabamsiisa. Talaalliin kun waa tokkolleen isaa qaama kee keessatti hin hafu. Yaaddawuun waa'ee talaallii fi hormaataa yookaan dahumsa qabaachuun humaa rakkoo hin qabu. Hormaanni fayyaa keenya keessatti hedduu fardiidha. Waa'ee talaallii COVID-19 fi ulfaa laalchisee odeeffannoo dabalataa argachuuf ogeessa yookaan doktora kee waliin haasawi. Galatoomaa.
Ayyee daawwattoota keenyaa deebineerraa jaan ifaa beeksisa garaagaraa dhagaa dhimmi koovidii akkaan yaaddessaadha sabateedhaa fi ramzii kaawuntii haaluma wal fakkaatuun biiroo fayyaa minisootaa yookiis MDH irraa beeksisa dhimma talaallii vaayiresii humneessituu fi haaluma wal fakkaatuun immoo ulfaaf talaallii kan jedhu irratti dhaamsa darbeedha. Warreen magaalaa lakkuu keessa jiraatanii ijoollee waggaa 5 hanga 12 dabalatee isaa olitti talaallii fudhadhaan dhaamsaa biiroo fayyaa minisootaa yookiis immoo CDC turtiin keessan waliin haa ta'u. Daqiiqaa yartuu qofa taasisna kana booda Jan. So yes, hello our viewers. As I mentioned at the beginning of our interview today, I got a special guest. His name is Jan. Jan has been in Oromiyaa for 2 years. During his stay, he able to learn Afaan Oromoo. So Jan, for our audiences, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, especially your profile or your biography in short, and then how do you see and how do you learn Afaan Oromoo?
Yeah. So yes, my name's John Keller. Also, great video. Get vaccinated. So my name's John Keller. Yeah. I'm 28 years old. I originally worked. I got a degree in journalism, and basically I didn't like the radio. I was in sports radio. I didn't like sports radio very much. So I wanted to see explore kind of different opportunities, and that's where I kind of had experience teaching. So I joined the Peace Corps, and in that opportunity, I was able to go to Ethiopia, and they selected me to live in Metu. And honestly, to be honest, in high school and college, I had to learn languages. I learned Spanish and German, and I didn't learn anything. I took the classes, passed them, didn't learn anything. I can't speak any German. I can't speak any Spanish. But it was much different when I joined the Peace Corps because I knew that I was going to speak this language on a daily basis. So I took it much differently. And then when I lived in Oromiyaa with Oromos, I learned that I was able to, people appreciated so much that I tried to learn the language. And so they were very patient with me as I struggled. And then that made me want to learn more. So I would, hang out with people, and sometimes, what people do in Ilibabor, I guess, and in Harar and Jima in their downtime, is hang around, drink coffee, and sometimes chew some stuff. So that's where I would, just hang out with people. And so I really found that I was able to find acceptance with these people who, encouraged me to continue to learn Oromish. And that's why I fell in love with the area. I fell in love with the place. I found everyone to be very supportive, and so that's why I was encouraged to improve my Afaan Oromoo. I don't speak perfectly. I try. My wife we speak Oromifa a good bit together, but she's critical sometimes of my Oromifa skills, which she should be. So yeah, and then I now am back in Minnesota working to get my master's in international development, and hope to return. And as I said, I have land there that her father was very kind to gift to us, which we're building a house on. And so yeah, it's a little bit about me. I hope to return there. I was there actually last November, so we've been back quite a few times.
Wonderful. So especially while we are making this interview, especially it helps for non-Oromos, because how the Ethiopian history written and how the Oromos issues is narrated is something confusing, because Oromo is one of the largest and the biggest tribe in Ethiopia, even in the Horn of Africa. Even if Afaan Oromoo is the third widely spoken in Africa and the most widely spoken in Ethiopia, it is not an official language nowadays, because from day to day, how the higher governmental officials is treating the issue of Oromo is different. So you understand the matter and the importance of language. That's why you learn it Afaan Oromoo in 2 years, and you are speaking wonderful. Don't undermine the level of your accuracy and fluency. You are wonderful, honestly speaking.
Thank
Because
you.
2 years, it's a radical change as to me, as a person who learned it about language as well. So, um, what do you tell to non-Oromos who speaks English across the globe? Who is Oromo for you? Just you married Oromo now, you learn it the culture of Oromo, you learn it Oromo's language at the same time, Afaan Oromo, and then you got an information about Oromiyaa, and you have seen it actually. Seeing is believing, right? So,
Yeah.
is there anything you can tell to other individuals? Who is this Oromo? Because we have seen that Oromo have been protesting. If you see across the globe, in Europe, in America, and wherever you see, and they are asking for their own kinds of rights. It could be human rights and a kinds of any kinds of marginalization. It could be about culture or language or other economic things. But in general, what do you tell to net Oromos about Oromo and Oromiyaa?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one, I was luckily to be accepted into the community, right? Some people are Oromo whether they like it or not, right? Like that's how you're born. So I was very fortunate to be able to be accepted into that community. What I'd say is, be passionate about your culture. And I know one of the big issues is the children, whether they're learning Oromifa, and they're kind of growing up in different cultures, and how to keep the Oromo culture in different places. And I'd say that's difficult, right? That's why you have outlets like this, where you can be able to have ways to spread your culture, not in Oromiyaa. I'd also say that it's very important to build Oromiyaa, right? To come here to Minneapolis, but also, keep in mind what's back at home, right? Like, for example, the town that I lived in, there was one bus that would go from Lalo to Gordomo, the town I lived in, and that was actually paid for by somebody in Minneapolis. So the only bus for me to get to my town was actually paid for by somebody, like owned by somebody. Like, they made money from it. That's great, right? But right, there was only one bus. So because of resources here in Minneapolis, they were able to kind of build wealth and give opportunities to people in Oromiyaa. So yeah, I mean, I'd also say, politics gets really complicated into it, right? Because you have two kind of different competing factions, right? To think about, right? I don't have maybe a good answer for that. I mean, I'm pretty well informed on it, but also it's probably not my place to give opinions on who to support in terms of two different factions in Oromiyaa, because I also don't know, because it's just very complicated, right? Because it is 60 million people. I think Oromos are technically maybe the biggest stateless nation in the world, right? Because I think the Kurds have 40 million people and the Oromos have 50 to 60. I don't know what the exact number is now. And it's also always going to be difficult for Oromiyaa to kind of get autonomous rights because of Finfine, right? Because there's so much wealth in Addis. So yeah, I'd say learn the language where you can, keep strong to your roots, and keep supporting Oromiyaa in any way possible.
Wonderful. Jan, I don't want to ask you some kind of political question because, as you said, in Oromiyaa, there are different kinds of scenario about Oromo politics. It's okay. But I would like to ask you about
Sure.
Oromo and Oromiyaa in general, especially your experience. You have been there in a few years, but in a few years, you are able to speak Afaan Oromoo. At the same time, you are able to learn Oromo's culture. That's why I've been showing a given video here. I think our audience should know. I met you for the first time on Irecha festivity, what we call it a kind of Thanksgiving. So there are many crowd at your background while I
Oh yeah.
like a few minutes ago. So the reason why I'm asking all that one, you can observe that there are many individuals who have been in Oromiyaa for their entire life. For instance, they born there, grow up there, or some of them came to Oromiyaa and they stay there, or teaching in a given school or in a given office for a while, like for 20 years. It could be for 4 years, 50 years, something like that one. But some of them, they can't speak this language. So as a person who learned it, journalism, and as a person who has been teaching English in Oromiyaa, particularly in Ilobabor, so what kind of message you have for them, especially those individuals who have, maybe it could be an ego to hate that language. We don't know exactly the reality, but we can predict it could be this one, right? So there are some individuals who have been in Oromiyaa for entire life, but they can't speak Afaan Oromoo. For instance, if they went to a store or somewhere to buy something, they try to speak that language, and then you can observe a kind of communication gap, because a person who is giving a service for them can't speak Amharic, but they can't speak Afaan Oromoo at the same time. So for such kind of issue, what kind of message you have as an intellect, especially about language, and as a teacher of language, and as a person who's going to be a professor in the future in Oromiyaa? So this is something very rational. It's not politics at all, but it's all about humanity and about identity. So what kind of comment you have?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say it's important for people to learn Oromifa when they live in Oromiyaa, right? If you're visiting, whatever, because yeah, I mean, this reminds me of a story. I remember I was actually visiting the Kempt, and I was sitting having kitfo in front of a bus station, and I remember I was with a friend of mine, and we were just eating kitfo, and a guy came up to us and said, "You guys are speaking Oromifa?" And I said yes. And we talked with him for a minute, and then he kind of got up and shouted, and he said, like, there are people who come, kind of basically said what you said, and that was kind of a moment. He said, look at these Faranjis sitting here who speak our language. There's other people who come into our area and live here for their whole lives and don't speak our language. And I think that's maybe a line to draw. If people do come from other areas and learn Oromifa, then I think that's very important, because it's not easy to do. And I think it's important for people, if you live in an area, to learn the language of that area, especially if you want to integrate and be a part of that society. So I would say it certainly is very important. I mean, that's why I tried to learn it. It's also one thing nice about Oromifa. Well, I guess if you're trying to learn coming from Amharic to Oromifa, it might not be quite the same. But coming from English to Oromifa, it wasn't as difficult as it could have been because of the alphabet, which is very nice. It's a little bit easier to learn because I can like write the same letters, right? So yeah, I'd say if you can pretty much say this about anywhere. If you go to a place and you live there, you should do your best to learn the language, to respect the culture, and learn the culture. And so if people don't do that, then you can be critical of that. Doesn't mean that they're bad people if they don't learn the language, but yeah, I think that's a problem.
Great. So from the Oromo protests, especially in Oromiyaa, back home and across the globe, the question of Oromo is, we do have many questions as a largest tribe, but from that, one is about language. Because Oromo has been asking for an issue, saying that Afaan Oromoo should be an official language at federal level. Because when you see the principle of democracy, now you are doing your master's program, which is international development, which means when you see about that and about democracy at the same time, there is a principle of democracy which says majority versus minority, right? Oromo is not asking something which is irrelevant. Oromo is asking about the right. So as a person who is learning or studying his master's in international development, how do you see the question of Oromo? Oromo is saying that Afaan Oromoo should be an official language at federal level because majority of the people are speaking this one. This is the reality. It's not a kind of fake scenario, but you have seen that actually. Because when you see even the map of Ethiopia, if you see across all coasts, it could be from north side, from south, from west, and from the other border too, you will see that Oromiyaa is one of the largest in terms of natural resources, at the same time in terms of population. Actually, you are mentioned at the beginning, Oromo close to 60 million, right? Even if that one from 100, and we have around 80 tribes, imagine. If you see Oromo is more majority of that one. So how do you see the question of Oromo when they are asking, saying Afaan Oromoo should be an official language? How do you see this question?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say certainly, like, yes, it can and maybe should be an official language. But ask what, like, if it becomes an official language, what does that like mean? Would that mean that you would have dual languages? Yes, I think certainly it should be an official language. But also, like, let's say that happens. Let's say tomorrow Abby says, okay, Oromifa is an official language. Like, what would that actually mean? And I think that's an important question to ask too. Would you speak Oromifa in Parliament then? I don't know. And I don't know maybe what your answer to that would be. So I'd also make sure to think that yes, maybe it should be an official language, but also thinking about the mechanics of what that would mean in terms of the actual like day-to-day ongoings, right? Because you can at the government level in Oromia, Oromifa is used, right? So that's something that is there. Official documents are written in Oromifa, right? Like that's not a problem. So yeah, I just make sure that also like yes, as you said, I think 60 is a little high. I think the official number is like 50. I think it's 50, but it's probably more around 60 because there hasn't been a census in a while. Yeah, so by means of democracy, certainly should be an official language, but also make sure we think about what that would mean in terms of the day-to-day application in the government.
Cool. So I don't want to disclose about it actually because I'm acting like as a journalist, but how the Oromo elites or educated individuals mention about it and how Oromo political parties define this one, especially OFC, Oromo Federalist Congress, at the same time Oromo Liberation Front about it. They have a kind of point about it. But I can't paraphrase that one for an individuals who have been listening us now, but they are believing that since Oromo is a majority and the language is spoken by the majority in East Africa, not only in Ethiopia. So they have a belief that because language is very important for many things, because language is a business, right? It's not only tools of communication, it's a means of business. In terms of that one, when you see the source of income in that countries, many of them from Oromia. You mentioned previously you like buna or what we call coffee. You said I got around 5 cups or something like that one, and then you say shini, which is wonderful. So likewise, this and the others can be interpreted in different way at the same time, but we as Oromo believe that Afaan Oromoo should be an official language that many thousand individuals sacrifice their life, especially uses Kero and the Kare. At the same time, many of them are languishing in a prison now for this kind of cause at all. So as I said, I don't push you to politics at all, but let's wrap up here. But here, now I'm going to wrap up our interview because I said we have around a few minutes, but we are going around 45 minutes now. So
don't worry about it.
Last question, you actually mentioned about it, but I mean, what good thing is you learn it about Oromo, especially I want to listen what you said in Afaan Oromoo before and say in English. So what good thing is you learn it about Oromo, especially you said about the culture, everything, something like that one. And what do you suggest so those non-Oromos, especially from Europe or from America, to visit and to work in Oromia and to invest and to do some research about Oromo and Oromia? What kind of message you have and how do you tell about Oromo and Oromia?
Yeah, so I think what I said a bunch of different things in Oromifa, but I think overall what I appreciate the most is the community. I found the ability to make connections is unlike anything here in America. In America, you go from your house to your job to a store, and you don't talk with anybody. If you go meet your friends, you go meet your friends. In Oromia, it's much different than that, or at least the experience was for me. I would go to school. I would, go teach. I would hang out in the teacher's lounge. Talk with 10 other teachers. I would go get coffee at the coffee place. There could be 3 or 4 different people from around the town, right? And we would just talk, and we could move on, and that was that. I'd see that person maybe a week later, and that would happen 3 or 4 times a day. There were small interactions, like seeing those people on the street. Going to market and forming connections there. You just I made a lot more connections. And so, like I said, maybe said this poorly. On holidays, I would have to make plans because so many people would invite me to their houses, and I would go there, and everyone wants you to eat, and so I would almost struggle because I would have 10 different people inviting me, and I'd like to go, but I'd also say, look, I can only eat so much. And so it was the welcoming community that never asked for anything more than my presence. They just wanted to hear what I thought about America, about American politics, about the students, about they wanted to hear how I'm improving in Afaan Oromoo. And I really appreciated that in terms of, I don't know, just as a human being. I found that to be wonderfully fulfilling and wonderfully, connecting with the community. Like a lot of times they talk about community here in America, and I didn't really ever know what that meant until I went and lived there. So that's what I really appreciated. And also that would go across different cultures, right? Like getting on buses. Oh man, I spent lots of times and Lalo's very far. It's 650 kilometers from Adi. So it's about a 3-day bus ride. So I spent a lot. I'm also very tall. I'm 6'3", so almost 2 meters, I think 1.95 meters. So I would be jam packed into little, minibuses and dolphins, and so I spent a lot of time in those. And also, for example, just little things, like if I ever got some Dabo Colo, I would go and I would give Dabo Colo to everyone on the bus, right? And if anybody else got Dabo Colo, they would give Dabo Colo to everyone on the bus. And so it's those little things. That's not a very big deal. So people give Dabo Colo to everyone on the bus, right? That's a little 2-minute interaction, but those add up, right? Those add up on a daily basis, and that's those adding up of different interactions across the entire population really made me appreciate the people and made me want to learn the language and things like that. So that's what I appreciated about.
Sorry for my interruption.
Yeah.
I do have a follow-up question over there, because you have been there, seeing is believing, right? You have been there and you see how Oromo is reacting with a new guest or something very strange like you, because we went in Oromiyaa around Ilobab or Lalo, you are new, you are strange for them, but they will welcome you and you are telling us what. But there are some individuals who try to brought some kind of false narration for defamating Oromo, saying that Oromo never respect, Oromo never love, Oromo never welcome individuals, something like that one. So you have a witness about it. So is there anything you can say something about it? Because sometimes, for the sake of politics, people are using and they try to defamate, because as you know, you can observe such kind of things from different elites from different tribe. I don't want to mention this elite or this kind of tribe, but generally speaking, you are telling me something which contradicts what they are saying. So you can disprove that, and I know that because I raised there, I grew up in that kind of thing. So I've been here for a few years, so I know that in my daily life. But you are telling me that. So what do you say about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, well, one, you have to identify why they are there. What is their motivation to being there? So I can give you an example. I kind of mentioned this in terms of in Oromiyaa, people who might not have the best idea of Oromos, who I interacted with, because there's not a lot of foreigners in Ilibabor. There's almost none. The only other ones that I really saw were Indian professors at Metu University, and they largely didn't like the people, because they kind of saw they didn't try to learn the culture, didn't try to learn the language. And there is I think anybody would agree with this, there's a problem in the classroom with cheating, right? So they were professors who saw some students cheating and basically said, we don't like these students, we don't like these people, and they didn't try to learn the language, didn't try to learn anything. In terms of people living in other areas, yes, I mean, I've seen coverage by the New York Times that has been just awful in terms of how they represent other ethnic groups. So I would identify why those people are there, what are their goals, and how that comes out in their opinions, right? So are they there to help one group? Are they there because they're journalists trying to talk about a conflict? Because if they're a journalist trying to talk about a conflict, they want to create narratives, right? They want to create narratives. So that is informed in what they're speaking about. So that's what I'd say to that. Why identify why they're there and what are their motivations, and then you can see a lot of how that plays into their experience.
Actually, this is not by foreign individuals who have been in Oromia. Actually, people who live
Oh.
in Ethiopia by self, they can narrate this thing in different way. Not an individuals from out of Oromia or like something like from out of Ethiopia, but individuals who live there, they try to defamate this thing, especially it could be from other tribes you already mentioned actually, but not individuals or professor or a person like you from abroad came to Oromia. They are not defamating Oromo. They are telling that who is Oromo, and they are describing in a wonderful way, and they are shaping the wrong narration about Oromo. But individuals in the country, they try to attack Oromo by defamating in the inverse of what you said. You said Oromo is welcoming me with love and respect, especially during holiday. They are inviting me to their home and feeding me, and they are giving me coffee, food, and others. You are telling me that. But some individuals, especially other tribes in the country, they are describing in the different way. That's what I want to say. So before we wrap up, you learned it, your degree program in journalism. So since you are learning that course, even if you were a teacher of English there, but you have a concept of journalism. So there is a point about journalism when you become a voice for voiceless people. If you see many medias in Ethiopia, they are propagating the politics of that country under the leadership of the current government, Prosperity Party or Biltigina, whatever they call it. But but when you think the concept of journalism, you have to be very rational and try to balance things. That means those are opposite of that one, and at the same time supporting that idea. So how do you see, which is too general actually, there is some research, but from your observation during your stay, how do you see the press freedom in Ethiopia from your kind of, you can hear from different individuals, of course. So how do you see press freedom in Ethiopia? And finally, what kind of message you have for any audiences who are watching us now? That's going to be my last question.
Okay. Yeah. So press freedom. I mean, right. I mean, it's a problem, right? Like, I don't think me saying that isn't going to change that. It's a problem. I mean, I think the government has also been limiting like licenses too for people to report. I'd also say one thing that is not talked about enough in terms of press freedom in Ethiopia, because right, like it's a problem, right? Like there isn't quite the press freedom that you'd want. Is that a lot of press is totally based out of Finfine. It's totally based out of Addis. And so that's one problem, is that basically the farther away you go, the less informed it gets, because all of the journalists who report to the world and affect world opinion are based in Addis, and that can be a problem in terms of what messages are getting across. And yeah, I mean, I'd say the press freedom in Ethiopia, it's complicated too, because it's a problem because the government limits stuff, and also the people who do come in sometimes aren't quite as well informed, and so it's a complicated problem that doesn't have any like clear solutions. It's not like an issue where it's like, hey, look, the government needs to stop limiting people speaking what they want. Well, what happens when people do come in and report and don't say truthful things, or they don't say untruthful things, they say ignorant things? There's a difference there. They think they're saying truthful things. And also, some journalists get thrown in jail, right? Or aren't allowed to stay there, or come back, and so stuff happens. That's just an issue, right? Like that's a problem. In terms of what I'd like to say to everybody, I'd say thank you for having me on. I think that it's very important to keep the discussions going. I mean, and also, thank you for having me on. I think it's also interesting to hear different perspectives, right? And I have a different perspective. It might not be the best perspective. It might not be the most informed perspective, although I try to stay informed. But it's a different one. And I think that's one thing that's important too, is to just not always get what we say in America is you get stuck in like an echo chamber where you talk with the people you agree with, and so the ideas bounce off, and then you just keep like saying yes, we are totally correct. So I think it's also important to hear some different perspectives just to escape, because sometimes you bounce off, and they're correct, right? But sometimes they bounce off, and you're like, wow, we're really right, when it's really like, yeah, you're a little bit right. So that's why, I'd say thank you for having me on, and thank you for broadening some perspectives, even if it's just my lowly opinion. And yeah, I mean, I think I've conveyed how I feel about Oromiyaa, how I feel about the language, the culture, the people. It's very important to me. Will continue to be important to me, and I just feel very lucky to have had a small part in it.
Wonderful. So, as I said, I'm about to wrap up my interview, but since you have been a teacher, I do have one question.
Sure.
I said this is going to be my final question, but you have been in Oromiyaa as a teacher. So during your stay, you have been teaching at elementary level, right?
Secondary.
So secondary, high school.
Yeah, 9th and 10th grade is what I taught.
All right. So which grade you have been teaching there?
9th and 10th grade.
Wonderful. So I have a question. That's a good thing, though. I thought you were teaching at elementary level. So if you were teaching secondary level, grade 9 to 10, that's wonderful. Maybe my question is relevant now. So many people saying that the educational policy of Ethiopia nowadays is so wonderful, effective, and competent at international level. But at the same time, the performance of the students at the same time, that means grade 10, that's the time they complete grade 10 and they're looking for a job, right? By default. Mm-hmm. And some of them join preparatory level. That means that's very important point. Let's put aside the narration which says the Ethiopian educational policy now is wonderful, effective. And at the same time, when they see the performance of the students, some of them say they are good, bad. At the same time, I have two questions in this one. How do you see the educational policy of Ethiopia at this moment, especially even teachers? You said in the school there were 25 teachers. From 25 of teachers, you say I think two of them speak English, right? So that means they teach that language not in Afaan Oromoo, not in Amharic. Maybe two teachers who teach Afaan Oromoo and Amharic may speak that language. Unless the rest of them, they teach their students in English, right? Because the medium of instruction is English at high school level. So when you see the performance of the teachers and at the same time students, what kind of message you have for Ethiopian teachers at large, Oromiyaa in particular?
Yeah, so this is, I want to give a good answer to this, so it's going to be a little longer. Well, let me clarify that. So 2 to 3 teachers spoke English, like I could talk with them. Probably 10 to 15 of the 25 had enough English to teach in it. Like some teachers would know all of the English terms for chemistry, so they would teach chemistry in English. And then 10 like legitimately don't speak any English. And yes, like you would learn history from a teacher who doesn't really speak English. And so yes, I honestly, you kind of actually hit on one of my biggest criticisms of the Ethiopian education system that I was involved with was that the problem is that teaching in Ethiopia is not very highly valued, right? When you ask any student, my students didn't want to become teachers. So a lot of times it's the lower level university students who end up becoming teachers. And so that's a problem. Also in my school, as I kind of mentioned, my school is very rural. And so a lot of the teachers in my town were very young and not happy to be there. They said, I got a university degree. I don't want to live in Lala. I want to live in Metu. I want to live in Gore. I want to live in Jima. I want to live in the campus. So that was a big problem there. Another problem is that when I was there, I think it's still the same way. 1st to 8th grade teachers don't need a university degree. They only need to go to a technical college. So what happens was that teachers in elementary schools in rural areas haven't been to university, so students are learning English from people who really don't speak English. They only have a 2-year degree. So how can you expect a student in 9th grade who's been learning English from people who don't speak English to all of a sudden learn in English? That's a big problem. And lastly, there's also just some problems that are like ingrained in society. And what I mean by that is, like, I had a student, Tamam Mustafa. He is an amazing individual. He had to walk like 3 kilometers to school every single day. He was the best student in my grade. He could speak English. He was an absolutely remarkable person because he had 8 brothers and sisters. Right, his dad, his family they're small rural farmers, as were almost all of my students. But Tamam would stay after school. He had to sleep in Lalo some days. He would go to the shorba house and have like a one bar shorba and just like sleep in a room with 10 other students. And Tamam also the pass rate from 10th grade to 11th grade in Lalo was like 10%. Only 10% of students. I think it was like 15 students went from 10th to 11th grade. But anyway, Tamam had to end up going to nursing school after 10th grade because he said, look, my family needs money, right? He got all A's, he passed the matric, no problem. But after 10th grade, he went to a nursing school so that he could end up making money for his family after 2 years. So after another 2 years after 10th grade. So instead of going to preparatory school, and he could have been a doctor, he could have been anything he wanted. He didn't do that because his family needed money quicker. And so that's like just one of the problems there. Even if you have the most motivated students possible, there are still going to be problems that are kind of very complicated.
Wonderful. So let's wrap up here. If we talk about the education policy in Ethiopia, since I learned education at the same time, we can say a lot about it. It can be how education or quality of education can be impacted or influenced. It could be from the system by itself, the policy. It could be from the government. It could be from the family. It could be from the teachers. It could be from the students. It could be from the environment. Again, how much those teachers paid from government? Are they well paid to dig a lot, and they have an internet access to dig and research a lot to educate their students? There are many scenarios we can brought. Anyways, Ethiopian education policy is at a critical time. Honestly speaking, now at risk, we can say that. So thank you for being my guest today. Galatoomii ulfaadhu yeroo biraa qophii biroodhaa walitti deebina. Afaan Oromoodhaan nagaatti dhaamiti yeroo biraa walitti deebina Jaan.
Haa ta'u, walaagina, hora bula, nagaatti.
Ayyee daawwattoota keenya egaa keessummaa koo kan ture Jaan ture. Jaan Illuu Abbaaboor keessatti barsiisaa ture. Wayita barsiisaa ture keessatti Afaan Oromoo barachuu danda'eera turtii waggaa 2. Namoonni biyya Oromiyaa keessa jiraatan immoo maaliif afaan kana baruu dadhaban laata? Gaaffiif deebii keenya keessatti waan dubbanne qabna. Kana qofallee otoo hin taane Oromoof Oromiyaa Afaan Oromoo irratti waan jedhe qaba Jaan. Hordofaan isiniin jedha. Waan bal'oo mari'anneerra. Ani tichaa guddataan ture gama Oromoo diyaasporaa yaannoo hordoftanii yeroo biroo qophee biroodhaa walitti deebina. Har'aaf nagaatti.